As I was in a meditative reverie, listening to Suzanne's guidance, listening to Sharon's playing, I was thinking about the service, the ministry that our board members do for us when they lead us in meditation. I don't know if everyone knows that every time a meditation is led up here, someone sat down and thought it through and wrote it out before they came here. Now, I think we could all probably do it ad hoc because Spirit's in charge, but I want to just honor and acknowledge those board members who take the time to lead us in meditation. It's an act of love, but it's also an act. It takes time for people to assemble that, put it together. Sometimes they work with Sharon to create special musical arrangements to be part of that. So today's talk is about service. We're going to be hearing from three of our brothers and sisters out of the congregation. Before we do that, you guys sit tight. I just want to set it up so that, yeah, exactly. Sally just went, "Oi!" So let's start with a little humor, okay? A kindergarten teacher gave her class a show and tell assignment of bringing something to the class to represent their religion. So then the first boy got up in front of the class and said, "My name is Benjamin, I am Jewish, and this is the Star of David." The second boy got up and said, "My name is Marty, I'm Catholic, and this is a crucifix." A third boy got up in front of the class and said, "My name is Tommy, I'm Baptist, and this is a casserole." Anybody grew up Baptist? Is that true, Claire? Beautiful. So before we hear from our brothers and sisters who want to share some thoughts with us, I just want to put this in some context because last time we did this in June, I did get some negative feedback from a couple people who didn't think that this kind of exercise was particularly useful. And that's a perfectly fine opinion. I'm sure that there are days that people think that what I have to share up here isn't particularly useful as well, and that's fine. But I just wanted to explain why we do this, to give ourselves a sense of the value, why I think it's valuable, why your board thinks it's valuable. So you may remember some of you were here last year when we conducted a survey and we asked everybody to tell us how many total years we've spent in New Thought, whether it's in unity or Christian Science or religious science, science of mind. And it turned out when we added up the years, it was around 2,000 years. 2,000 years of accumulated New Thought experience and practice sitting in this room right now. That's equivalent to the number of years that have elapsed since Jesus the Christ did his ministry, right? So I was contemplating what that 2,000, I was contemplating our brothers and sisters who have agreed to speak, and I apologize for prolonging the nervousness. So you know, they say one of the most terrible things or terrorizing things is public speaking, right? So this is what terror looks like. But I was thinking about what Charles Fillmore said about unity. He said, some of us know this quote pretty well, "Unity is a link in the great educational movement inaugurated by Jesus the Christ. Our objective is to discern the truth in Christianity and prove it. The truth that we teach is not new, neither do we proclaim special revelation or discovery of new religious principles. Our purpose is to help and teach humankind to use and prove the eternal truth taught by the Master." So we're all part of this educational movement. And so it led me to this question. So who is unity? That's what is unity. Who is unity? Is it Charles Fillmore? Is it Myrtle Fillmore? Cora Fillmore? James Dillett Freeman? May Rollin? Ernest Wilson? Phil Pearson? Dorothy Pearson? Well, of course it is. And it's also each one of us sitting in this room here today. We are unity. We, with our 2,000 years of New Thought experience, are unity. Our brothers and sisters sitting in unity centers around the world today are unity. Each of us has studied, struggled, demonstrated, manifested, despaired, and surrendered day after day, year after year, convicted in the truth that Jesus and those who followed after him were living in truth consciousness and that we live in truth consciousness. Now we here, Capital City Unity, we proclaim ourselves a church, but who is the church? Church is not a building, as we demonstrate here every Sunday. It's an assembly of people determined to find and live the divine truth together. We're here to do this together with one another. Church, Capital City Unity, is an agreement of its people with the truth that Jesus proclaimed when he promised that when two or more are gathered together in his name, he is fully present among them. And that means that right now, right here, the Christ presence is here, among us, with us, as us. And the Christ presence has a face. We can look around the room and see the face of the Christ presence. I'm looking at it. You're looking at it. The Christ presence has a body, a physical, mental, spiritual presence. We are looking at it. We are feeling it right now. So I was also thinking about, in asking a question, if we are the church, we are also the ministers. How many people heard Dorothy Pearson stand up in the pulpit at Christ Unity and say, I'm looking at the ministers, you're all ministers? Yes, I see a few hands go up. So I was thinking about when this idea first came into Christianity, and some of you may recall it occurred back in the 16th century when Martin Luther proclaimed the priesthood of the faithful. Martin Luther said we don't need no popes, no bishops. We don't need no priests because we are all equally blessed by the divine. We all equally have access to it. He said all Christians are truly of the spiritual estate and there is no difference among them, save of office alone. That's an externality. Luther said, as St. Paul says, we are all one body, though each member does its own work to serve the others. This is because we have one baptism, one gospel, one faith, and are all Christians alike. For baptism, gospel, and faith, these alone make spiritual and Christian principles. So the idea of the priesthood of the people goes back 400 years. And over the time, especially as the Protestant Revolution unfolded, we had the Congregational movement here in the United States, and we had the Quakers. The Quakers got rid of ministers, preachers, priests altogether. And the Quakers just sit in a circle in the silence until one of them is moved to share a truth. Now, Unity, when we started, we weren't a church. We didn't have churches. We had centers because we weren't a church, we were a school. The Unity School of Practical Christianity. So that meant, for better or for worse, that we had the old school structure of the teacher at the podium and the students taking notes and studying and doing homework and so forth. But I think that even though we became churches, everybody waited till Charles Fillmore died, so we became churches only after Mr. Fillmore passed. I think that what we actually are still is, we're more along the lines of the priesthood of the faithful that Martin Luther proclaimed. That every one of us, by virtue of our years of study and struggle in truth principles, has something powerful to share with one another. I was thinking about, remember when Reverend Cherie left, the board decided that rather than go hire a professional minister, that we would pluck one of us out of the congregation, turned out to be me, to be the principal speaker. But I assert that any one of us could get up here and give a lesson, share a thought, based on each one of our own years of experience in this work. And so that's why we started this Wisdom of the Congregation series, because it's our commitment to remember that we are all equally part of this church, that just because someone is standing up here, this doesn't give me any special standing over anybody else. I'm just one of us. We're all just one of us, and we're all equally shining with the Christ presence. And we all equally have an experience, a life experience that has something to teach each of us. So that's why we do this. So I'd like to invite Sally, Janet, Donald to come on up, take a seat right now. You are free, you are unlimited. There are no chains that bind you. Go ahead. So what these guys have bravely volunteered to help share is a question that many of us ask. So I was raised Catholic. I saw the hands of the Baptists. There are some Methodists, some Lutherans. There may be other faith traditions that we came from. But how many of us have wondered, well, what would it be like to grow up in unity? What would it be like to have had exposure to these ideas and these thoughts from an early age? So I asked for people who in this congregation who were raised in New Thought, again, might be unity, might be Christian Science, might be science of mind. I don't know if divine science is still around or other expressions. If they would be willing to share their thoughts and experiences growing up. Now, these three individuals have a cumulative 180 years in New Thought. Some of them were reluctant to tell me. It was hard to get them to give up that number. But I'd be proud of that, because I've only got 20 years. But we have 180 years here of accumulative wisdom. So what I've asked them to do, they're completely free to share whatever they want. There's no right thing, because each one of them had his or her own individual experience in going through life with some New Thought training, some New Thought environment, some New Thought family background, and so forth. So, Janet, I think you wanted to go first? You want to get it over with, correct? Okay. So, Janet Ledoux, thank you very much.
I'm Janet Ledoux. I was introduced to Unity by my mom, Charlotte Ledoux. She introduced my brother, Wayne, and my dad, Dewey Ledoux. I was in the 7th grade. Wayne was in the 5th grade. We all attended church at the Christ Unity Church downtown at the Crest Theater with Reverend John Hinkle, and soon to be joined by Reverend Jay Dishman. As time went on, Jay taught a Lessons in Truth class. Mom and I took the Lessons in Truth class, and when we all finished, we got our little graduation certificate. My brother was active in YOU. He took the train back with Hazel Smith to Unity Village to a YO conference. I was active in YAU, and later on down the road, Janet Sorensen Neff and I flew back to a YA conference at Unity Village. My brother was also a Boy Scout, and I don't know if this is true now with Boy Scouts, but back in the day, one of the coveted Boy Scouts awards was the God and Country Award. Wayne was an active member of the church. He mentored with Jay Dishman, and they went through the qualifications to earn his God and Country Award. Wayne was given his God and Country Award by Jay Dishman at the Crest Theater during one of our church services. In June of 1970, my brother received an invitation from the U.S. Army to go to Vietnam. That threw our family into Unity prayer mode, Unity positive thinking mode, unity. Believe in what you want to believe. Just before Wayne left, we gave him the prayer of protection, just like this. My mom had a stack of them at home. Every time we sent Wayne a care package, or every time we sent letters to Wayne, my mom put this in. Anybody that came over to the house, Mom handed out the prayer of protection just in case they would be sending Wayne a care package or a letter. Wayne was stationed in Quang Tri, Vietnam, which is that far from what used to be the North Vietnamese border. He drove his Jeep down Highway 1 to Hue and Da Nang. He drove his Jeep on Highway 9 to Khe Sanh and to the Rock Pile. I am sure that he drove his Jeep many other places that we never did find out about. In anticipation of my brother coming home, and the excitement and the joy and the thrill that was going to be, my dad painted the back fence. And anybody that came over was given a magic marker or a felt pen or something, I don't know. And they wrote a welcome home message to my brother on the fence. In June of 1971, we received a phone call from Wayne at Fort Lewis, Washington, where he had his flight reservations and he said he was coming home. You never saw one woman, my mom, put up a Christmas tree, decorate a Christmas tree, decorate the house for Christmas. It was June and our family was having Christmas. So it was a joy to go out and pick my brother up at the airport. As most people who probably spent some time in the environment that Wayne did, Wayne put it in the past. He just totally had no interest in sharing anything about his experiences there. But I am a firm believer that our unity teachings, our unity affirmations, and our unity prayers brought Wayne home. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. That was lovely.
Oh, thank you.
I'm Donald Smith, and I have been blessed, having had a very significantly important unity background. I remember Dad was member of the board for a period of time and had a little bit to say, I think, at the time of bringing John Hinkle to Sacramento, which was my first experience with real unity minister. Someone who really seemed to take a great deal of interest in young people. At the time, I think I was 11 or 12 years old, and certainly I had motivation to find some kind of source or something to rely on when I was growing up. Pimples and being a tad overweight and not yet playing sports and things that really wasn't too involved or too excited about going to school and all that sort of thing, even though I had a lovely mom and dad that were encouraging nevertheless. And I think I was growing up in East Sacramento, and I was reminded of that when Marty was talking about being Catholic, and I grew up in a Catholic neighborhood, and you could actually hear the chimes of St. Mary's, of course, playing every day to hasten people to Mass, and to my disgruntled friends who had to go to confess, the confessional, which was really scary, Marty, by the way. But I think those kind of things motivated me to finally join into something called the Youth of Unity, which all of us have had some background in. It was a very close-knit group, and one that allowed us to have almost a sort of communion in our own way. Every Sunday morning we would meet in the, I believe it was the Oddfellows building at the time, where Unity had its offices. And we would meet in the little office that was sort of between the outer office where the secretary was and where the minister had his office. And it was just so personal and so very close. And I think that was my motivation more than anything else. There was something for me to sort of rely on. And I had big brothers and big sisters in this group called Youth of Unity. And as Charlotte pointed out, every year we would have an opportunity to go back to School of Christianity in Kansas City and meet with young people in the Youth of Unity from all over the country. And it was just wonderful. But the very special thing about Unity to me was its personal outreach. Its special message to me, not only the fact that we were emphasizing the teachings of Christ, the New Testament, things that I could grasp and understand, especially when you're 11 or 12 years old. The world's a pretty big place. And it was so special to be able to enter into prayer, and I learned how to pray, I think, when I was in this group that met every Sunday morning. And I think I learned how to meditate as well. Maybe I wasn't aware of that word, but and what it really meant. But I learned how to pray, and we would all hold hands, and we would enter into a silence that I had never experienced in my life before. Unity then became very personal. It wasn't just something, a religion. It became a philosophy to me, a way of life, a way of guidance and assurance, and through the teachings of Christ and the teaching of truth, which I later found out was all so encompassing. This was a real wonderful time, even though probably the most difficult time in our lives is growing up and being 12 or 13 and not really, maybe a little bit terrified of all the things that are coming. And so this was my introduction to Unity, the Youth of Unity, and going to church on Sunday with my mom and dad. And we'll never forget that time. It's very special.
Thank you.
I grew up in Yuba City, California, and I came from a very spiritual family. My mother was a devoted Christian Scientist. My father was a Sunday school teacher in the Presbyterian Church. So Jesus had honorable mention every day of the week in my home. Whoop. Sorry, did I hold that too close? My first song that I learned was Jesus Loves Me. The first prayer that I learned was the 23rd Psalm, and my mother taught it to me in a very special way that I've never forgotten. She took the first 4 words of the 23rd Psalm and put the accent on each one for an example and how it applied to me. For an example, the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. And the Lord is my shepherd. She said, those 4 words will get you through life, and I want you never to forget them. And when the going gets tough, that'll come right out to you. When I was 10, they had a big Halloween party in the neighborhood. And all the women and the men had potluck suppers, and all the kids put on our very favorite costumes. And the woman I most admired in those days was Carmen Miranda. You remember her? And my mother took great pains gluing and stapling and sewing bananas and nuts and apples on a turban on my head. And she even put a beauty mark right there. And as I was coming down the stairs, I could see my father grinning from ear to ear. And the next moment, he had a massive heart attack, was rushed to the hospital where he passed away, and I never saw him again. I threw myself into a dog that my father had brought home several years before. Her name was Clancy. She was an Irish setter. And she was given to my dad by the owner, who was a hunter, and she'd broken her leg, and it didn't heal properly. So one leg went north, and the other 3 went south. So she was useless to him as a hunting dog. But it's the first time in my life I realized I'd fallen in love. I poured my emotions into this dog, my tears, my grief over the loss of my dad. And 3 days later, coming up the driveway, she had died in her place, waiting for the sound of a car coming home. And at that moment, it changed my life and my mother's forever. And we were both plunged into the valley that is written in the book that we all got this morning, the Valley of the Shadow of Death. My mother had the wisdom and the will and the faith to crawl out of the valley. But to me, there were no exit lights, and I remained in the valley for many years. When I was 13, my mother came home and said, I met a new friend today, and her name is Helen Gray, and she gave me this little book, which I think is the most beautiful book I've ever read. It's small, but it's so powerful. And it was the Daily Word. And she invited us to come to the Crest Theater to hear John Hinkle. She said, come early because it's going to be packed. We came early, it was packed, and we had to sit in the lobby. But the smell and the sight of the popcorn brewing just renewed me. And when John Hinkle started to speak, it was like an unseen hand reaching into my soul and turning all the lights back on. I've been blessed for so many years from different Unity ministers, beginning with Phil and Jay, and then Dorothy and John Hinkle, and then Dorothy and John and Phil. And then Michael Moran, do you remember him? Michael Moran and his lovely wife, Faye. Each of them imparted something that I could not live without. And then Cherie came along. And then Marty. And Marty, I know you're not a minister, but to me you are. And Cherie and Dorothy covered us with a warm blanket every Sunday and taught us how to live from the inside out. Marty teaches us how to unite from the outside in, through history, through science, and especially, and I love it so much, the music. Music sets the stage for life. We hear one song for fear, a song for joy, a song for sadness. But music just connects where nothing else does. And Marty brings that to us. And I'm just so grateful that though I've been in and out of the valley ever since a few times, that I now have the courage and the faith, thanks to all these ministers and teachers and friends who have really made a huge, wonderful difference in my life, and I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
Can we go back now?
What do you guys think? So as I was sitting listening to each one of you, I thought I would love to hear a whole lesson from each of you, because I was listening not just with my mental ears, but I was listening with my heart. And that's what struck me the most, is that loving energy that you exude for us, for yourselves, for this rich history, this experience, this life experience, 180 years of this. And so we just take a moment in closing to express our gratitude, not only for your willingness to share with us, not only for all of the experiences that you went through, life, death, struggle, learning, forgetting, valleys, hilltops, all those kinds of things, but we all have had that. All of us have gone through this, regardless of our religious tradition in which we were brought up, or maybe some of us were brought up in any kind of tradition at all. And still we found our way here to one another. So let's just close our eyes and let's say this prayer. I'm going to say this prayer. Divine Presence, we thank you for the life that you have given us, and that you have always been in our hearts as a light, as a beacon, as a love. And sometimes we may have ignored you. Sometimes we may have pretended that you weren't there, but you always were there. You always called us back to you. And you gave us brothers and sisters in our congregations over the years who were your face of love, your face of compassion, supporting us in our struggles, celebrating our triumphs and breakthroughs, and helping us feel your presence that never eludes us. We're so grateful for Donald, Janet, and Sally to take the time to share just a little bit of their experience growing up in this truth tradition. And we are grateful that they had that opportunity and for their willingness to share that with us. Thank you, God. Amen.